Listen to me now, because what I am about to say will shake the dust from your spirit. 90% of believers are living beneath their birthright. They pray, they fast, they lift their hands, yet they know only the first step, only the surface of what heaven poured into oil. There are 5 levels of anointing, 5 rivers that flow through one jar, and if you have only bathed in the first, you have not yet known the fire that makes shadows flee or the calm that silences storms. Stay with me, child of God, and you will understand why oil was never meant to rest only upon skin. It was made to awaken eternity within you. Olive oil is not mere liquid. It is memory. It carries the hum of creation, the song of crushed fruit that became light. When you touch it, you touch the echo of God's own hand. But oil unspoken is power unused. And for too long, the children of promise have lived with capped bottles and sealed lips. Most believers live their entire lives knowing only the first level of anointing, and it is here that many find comfort but never discover transformation. This first level is often called the surface anointing, the introduction to the divine current. It is the moment someone touches oil to their forehead or their hands, whispers a prayer, and feels a flicker of peace rise in their chest. For a moment, the air feels lighter, the spirit calmer, and the heart steadier. Yet this peace often fades as quickly as it came, because the oil has not yet entered the depths of the soul. It has only brushed the surface, like rain that never soaks the soil. The first level teaches reverence, yes, but it is also where many stop without realizing there is more. This is the anointing that comforts without challenging, that soothes without stirring, that blesses without breaking open. It gives the believer enough warmth to know God is near, but not enough fire to transform the inner being. People love this level because it feels safe. There is beauty in it, a quiet grace. The oil becomes a sign of faith, a symbol of belonging. When a mother anoints her children before they leave home, when a pastor blesses the congregation with a dab of oil on the brow, that act becomes a covering, a small shield against the day. It reminds the heart that heaven watches. It brings assurance that one is seen, loved, and guarded. Yet this level is not meant to be the destination. It is a doorway, not a dwelling. The oil at this stage touches flesh, but does not yet penetrate spirit. It blesses the body, but has not yet transformed the mind. It is like standing at the edge of an ocean, letting the waves wash over your feet, while the deep waters call you further in. Most believers know the comfort of this shallow place. They return to it week after week, asking God for a feeling, for a moment of peace, never realizing that the oil's power is not in the touch, but in the surrender. The surface anointing is also where doubt often lives. Because when the oil is seen only as ritual, its purpose is misunderstood. People begin to treat it like tradition rather than transformation. They anoint out of habit, but not revelation. They say the right words, but their spirit remains still, unawakened. And so, when challenges come, they wonder why the peace fades, why the protection feels weak, why fear returns. It is because the oil has never been invited into the deeper chambers of faith. This level calls every believer to a choice, to remain where comfort ends or to move where power begins. The first anointing is a whisper from heaven saying, "There is more." The oil on the forehead is only a sign of what could live within the heart. Those who stay here know the symbol. Those who go deeper know the spirit. The second level of anointing is where the oil begins to breathe. It is no longer a symbol resting on the skin, but a living balm that moves through body and soul. This is the healing anointing. And when one steps into it, the oil starts to reveal its divine purpose. It carries restoration, not only for sickness, but for everything wounded, mind, memory, and emotion. In this realm, the believer learns that healing is not only about the absence of pain, but about the return of wholeness. The oil becomes a vessel for faith to take form. It listens to prayer, it carries obedience, and it delivers mercy. When the healing anointing flows, it does not always come with thunder or spectacle. Sometimes it comes as warmth beneath the hand, as tears that fall unplanned, as peace settling where fear once ruled. It is gentle but sure, quiet but powerful. The oil begins to speak to broken cells, weary hearts, and forgotten dreams. It tells the body to remember its original design. It tells the soul to stop trembling. It tells the spirit to rise again. This level teaches that God's touch is not distant or abstract. It is immediate and intimate, traveling through olive oil to reach what human hands cannot. Many people discover this anointing when they begin to pray over sickness, whether their own or another's. They feel something shift, a stirring like wind through dry leaves. The oil, once a symbol, becomes an instrument. It is no longer a token of faith, it is faith in motion. At this point, the believer's relationship with oil changes. They no longer anoint to perform a ritual, they anoint to release divine medicine. They understand that obedience activates the healing, that the oil itself holds no power apart from the word spoken over it. It becomes the meeting place between heaven's authority and human faith. But this level also requires surrender. Healing does not only come to the body, it often begins in the spirit. Old pain must be faced, hidden anger released, and unforgiveness washed away. The oil touches what has been buried deep. It brings forgotten wounds to the surface, not to expose, but to cleanse. It reminds the believer that the same God who heals the body also heals the mind, the marriage, the memory, the lineage. The oil becomes a silent counselor, teaching that true healing flows from alignment with God's will. When a person walks in the healing anointing, they begin to see others differently. They see pain not as punishment, but as invitation. Their hands carry warmth. Their prayers carry peace. They learn that to heal another is not to perform, but to love deeply through the Spirit. Every drop of oil they pour becomes a declaration that life still reigns, that what was broken can be made whole, that nothing is too far gone for divine repair. This is the level where the believer no longer doubts that God's power moves through them. They become living evidence of it. The third level of anointing is the mantle anointing, the place where the oil begins to assign, to appoint, and to awaken purpose. It is not a level of comfort, but of calling. When one reaches this point, the oil no longer comes just to heal or to soothe. It comes to mark. It rests upon a person and says, "You are chosen for a task greater than yourself." The anointing begins to separate you from ordinary living. It draws a line between what you once were and who you are now commanded to become. This is the moment when God's oil becomes an instruction, not just an experience. It is the mantle placed upon shoulders that once carried worry, now carrying destiny instead. The mantle anointing carries weight. It is the oil that rested on kings, prophets, and servants who were chosen to shift nations and generations. When this anointing finds you, it will not ask for permission. It will demand readiness. It will wake you in the middle of the night with burdens for things you never noticed before. It will stir your heart for people you used to pass by. It will make you see the unseen, hear the unheard, and feel the silent cries of those you are sent to reach. This is the oil that transforms the ordinary believer into a vessel of divine purpose. In this level, your prayers change tone. You stop asking only for blessings and begin to ask for instructions. You stop saying, "Use me someday," and start saying, "Use me now." The oil becomes an agreement between heaven and earth, binding you to an assignment. It gives you the authority to speak with clarity and the humility to serve with love. The mantle anointing does not glorify the person, it glorifies the mission. It makes you understand that your life is no longer yours alone. You are now carrying something sacred that must be poured out for others. This level also tests obedience. Many who feel the call shrink back because the oil brings responsibility, not convenience. It asks you to step out, to lead, to endure misunderstanding, to walk into places where comfort cannot follow. The mantle anointing will cost you sleep, reputation, sometimes even relationships, but it will fill you with a strength you never knew you had. It will give you words that cut through despair, hands that lift the fallen, and faith that refuses to bend under pressure. The same oil that once comforted now commands, because its purpose has matured within you. The believer who moves in the mantle anointing no longer walks for themselves. They walk for others. Every word they speak begins to carry a prophetic charge. Every act of kindness becomes an echo of divine instruction. The oil turns them into a bridge between heaven and earth, a messenger of hope, a vessel of leadership. They do not chase influence. Influence follows them because the oil declares their authority. The mantle anointing makes you unstoppable, not by strength, but by surrender. For once the oil chooses you, destiny begins to unfold with every step you take. The fourth level of anointing is the overflow anointing, the place where the oil refuses to stay contained. It no longer belongs just to you. It begins to spill from your spirit into the lives around you. This level comes after obedience has been tested and purpose has been accepted. At this point, you have been healed, called, refined, and shaped by divine fire. The oil inside you is now alive. It multiplies without your effort. It flows in your words, in your gestures, even in your silence. When you enter a room, the atmosphere changes. When you pray, peace falls like rain. When you speak, hearts remember their worth. This is the level where you become a carrier of God's presence, where others encounter Him simply by encountering you. The overflow anointing is not loud or boastful. It does not need to announce itself because it reveals itself. People around you begin to feel lighter without knowing why. They find clarity while speaking with you. They sense hope when you touch their shoulder or say a few simple words. That is the oil working through you, subtle, steady, unbreakable. You have moved from being a receiver to being a river. The oil no longer stops at your skin. It flows through your spirit to water the dry places in others. It is the fulfillment of the promise that out of your belly shall flow rivers of living water. At this level, the believer learns that influence is not a platform, but a fragrance. You do not have to try to make people listen. Your life itself becomes a sermon. Your joy becomes contagious. Your calm becomes comforting. Even your silence becomes instruction. The overflow anointing means that what God placed in you is now too vast to remain hidden. You carry peace where chaos once lived. You walk into tension and suddenly unity begins to form. You forgive quickly, love deeply, and bless even when unacknowledged. The oil at this stage is abundance of grace, grace that spills over, grace that cannot be measured or managed. But this level also carries responsibility. When the oil overflows, the enemy takes notice. Darkness recognizes light and tries to interrupt it, but it cannot destroy it. The overflow anointing shields you with divine authority, because what you release comes directly from God's Spirit, not your own strength. The more you pour out, the more you are refilled. The more you bless, the more heaven multiplies your portion. This is the beautiful paradox of overflow. You never run empty. The oil does not decrease with giving, it increases with obedience. When one walks in this anointing, they stop striving for recognition. Their satisfaction comes from witnessing others rise. Their joy comes from watching chains fall and hope return. They become like a well that never runs dry, a lamp that never dims. The presence of God in them radiates effortlessly. The overflow anointing is not about doing more. It is about being more, allowing God to live so fully through you that every encounter becomes an experience of His love and power. The fifth level of anointing is the covenant anointing, the deepest and most sacred realm, where the oil no longer rests on you but lives within you. It is the place where separation between heaven and humanity dissolves, where your will and God's will begin to move as one. This is not a level reached by effort or by title. It is reached through surrender, through the long obedience that allows the Spirit to make a permanent home in your being. The covenant anointing is not a moment of visitation. It is a life of habitation. Here, you do not merely experience God's presence. You become a vessel through which His presence abides. At this level, the believer stops reaching outward for divine encounters because the divine now flows inward constantly. You begin to walk as one who knows heaven's rhythm. Prayer is no longer a request, it becomes breath. Worship is no longer an event, it becomes existence. The oil within you begins to guide thought, speech, and movement. It whispers before you speak, corrects before you act, comforts before you cry. The Spirit becomes the compass of your entire being. Every choice starts to carry weight because every step feels like it is walked on holy ground. In this covenant anointing, miracles are not pursued, they happen naturally. You become the environment in which they unfold. When you speak healing, it manifests. When you declare peace, storms still. Your authority deepens because it is no longer drawn from emotion, but from intimacy. God trusts you with His secrets. You no longer chase revelation. Revelation follows your obedience. The covenant is not about power for display, but power for alignment with the very heart of God. You live no longer as a visitor in His presence, but as a citizen of His kingdom. The covenant anointing also carries a sacred stillness. It silences the noise of ego and ambition. You no longer crave validation, applause, or recognition, because the oil within you satisfies every empty space. It roots you in divine identity. You understand that your worth is not in what you do, but in who you belong to. This is the peace that surpasses understanding, the calm that cannot be shaken by storms, the joy that does not fade with seasons. You become unoffendable, unmovable, unafraid. The Spirit and your spirit begin to walk in harmony, speaking the same language, carrying the same pulse. Those who reach this level often glow with a quiet light. They do not strive to prove their faith, they embody it. Their presence alone breaks tension. Their words carry weight even when whispered. They become walking sanctuaries, places where others find refuge and encounter God without a sermon. The oil has become identity. The believer and the anointing are now one, bound in covenant. And through this union, everything they touch, every space they enter, every prayer they release bears the unmistakable fragrance of divine oneness. The sixth level of anointing is rarely spoken of, yet it reveals itself to those who live entirely yielded to the Spirit, the generational anointing. This level moves beyond the individual and begins to write history through the lineage of faith. It is the point where the oil you carry no longer belongs to you alone. It becomes an inheritance. What once flowed over your head now flows through your bloodline, your spiritual descendants, your community. The generational anointing is the oil that refuses to die with you. It lingers, multiplies, and continues its work long after your hands have stopped pouring. It is legacy made holy. At this level, God begins to use your life as a seed. Every act of obedience becomes a root that carries nourishment to generations yet unborn. The oil within you begins to touch your children, your students, your church, and even strangers who observe your walk. It travels invisibly like fragrance carried by the wind, marking those who come near your spirit with divine residue. You realize that the anointing is not just for the present moment, but for shaping the future. The prayers you prayed in tears become the foundation for someone else's victory. The sacrifices you made in silence become open doors for those who follow after you. The generational anointing teaches that true success in the kingdom is not measured by what you achieve, but by what you impart. At this stage, your desire shifts from personal blessing to generational transformation. You begin to intercede not only for your needs, but for the purity of your lineage, the preservation of purpose in your bloodline, and the faith of those who will come after you. The oil becomes like a covenant between heaven and your house, declaring that light will not depart from your family, that truth will not be lost among your descendants, that the Spirit will remain their inheritance. In this level, every battle you win is no longer just for you. It's for those who would have had to fight it after you. Every chain broken in your generation ensures that your children do not wear it. Every demon you silence spares another from hearing its voice. You begin to understand that the oil flowing in you carries both memory and mission. It remembers the prayers of your ancestors who cried for deliverance, and it fulfills those prayers through your obedience. You are the answer to someone's ancient cry, and through you, someone else's future is secured. Those who walk in the generational anointing often radiate quiet authority. They speak, and their words seem to echo through time. They love deeply because they see beyond the moment. They plant with patience because they know the harvest will outlive them. Their legacy is not carved in stone, but in spirit. The oil in them becomes a torch passed forward, ensuring that the fire of faith, healing, and power will never be extinguished in their line. The generational anointing is the divine continuation of God's promise that His Spirit will not only rest upon you, but remain with those who come after you. The seventh level of anointing is the glory anointing, the realm where the presence of God overshadows everything else and human effort dissolves completely. It is the level where the oil becomes light, where you no longer minister for God, but from God. Here, the believer's identity, purpose, and power are completely immersed in divine glory. The air itself feels different. The atmosphere bends to obedience. Miracles no longer surprise you. They are the natural language of this level. In this place, you do not strive to call heaven down because heaven is already resting upon you. This is the level where the veil between the seen and unseen becomes thin. You walk through ordinary moments with extraordinary awareness. Every sound seems to echo eternity. Every word spoken carries creative force. The oil of glory cannot be taught or imitated. It is birthed through complete surrender and purity of heart. It descends upon those who have died to ambition and risen into assignment, those whose hearts have been emptied of self so they can be filled with presence. The glory anointing is not about titles, crowds, or recognition. It is about oneness with the divine current that governs creation itself. When this level rests on you, you begin to see life differently. You no longer fear battles because you understand that you move under the shadow of divine authority. You no longer measure time in days, but in moments of obedience. You find yourself weeping not from sorrow but from awe, because you can feel the eternal weaving itself through your every breath. The oil at this level is weighty, almost tangible. When you pray, rooms shift. When you sing, chains fall without a word. The glory is so present that people near you begin to encounter God without you even touching them. But the glory anointing also carries deep reverence. It cannot coexist with pride, greed, or self-promotion. The one who walks in it must guard purity as a crown, for this level is holy ground. The Spirit becomes jealous over your time, your words, your motives. You are called to walk softly, to speak gently, to live as a mirror reflecting heaven's character. The oil of glory teaches that true power is quiet, that the loudest miracles happen in silence, and that the highest worship is obedience. You become a vessel so transparent that others see not you, but the God shining through you. In this realm, intercession becomes creation. You do not just pray for change, you birth it. You do not just carry light, you become it. The world around you begins to respond differently, as if recognizing that heaven has found a home on earth through your surrendered life. The glory anointing is not for display, but for divine habitation. It is the culmination of all other levels, the healing, the mantle, the overflow, the covenant, now fused into radiant unity. You are no longer just anointed. You are one with the anointer. Every breath, every step, every word is a living reflection of His glory made flesh through you. The 8th level of anointing is the eternal anointing, the realm where time, form, and flesh no longer limit the flow of God's Spirit within a soul. It is the anointing that does not fade, the oil that never dries, the communion that transcends life itself. This level is not earned through fasting or striving, but received through complete union, when the believer becomes so aligned with divine will that even death cannot separate them from the presence of God. The eternal anointing is what remains when every title, every position, every earthly assignment has ended, and only pure essence remains, spirit joined with spirit, light returning to its source. In this level, the oil within you ceases to be a tool and becomes identity. You no longer carry the anointing. You are the anointing. Your very being radiates the timeless fragrance of divine fellowship. You move in quiet harmony with eternity, unhurried by human clocks or expectations. Your peace cannot be stolen, your joy cannot be shaken, and your faith no longer wavers because it is rooted beyond the reach of circumstance. You begin to understand what it means to live on earth but breathe from heaven. You become a walking continuation of God's eternal presence, a living altar, a moving sanctuary, a song that never ends. At this stage, the Spirit no longer comes upon you or even merely dwells within you. The two are one. There is no division between your desire and His design. Every thought flows from divine wisdom. Every gesture echoes divine compassion. You begin to perceive the eternal purpose behind every trial, every delay, every wound. Nothing feels wasted anymore because the eternal anointing turns all things, pain, joy, loss, waiting, into worship. Your perspective shifts entirely. You no longer ask, "Why me?" but "What is God revealing through me?" The oil within you has matured into revelation. This level also brings profound stillness. It is no longer about doing, but about being. Those who walk here understand that eternity has already begun. Heaven is not a destination, but a dimension that reveals itself through surrender. You become unoffendable, untouchable, unbound by fear. You move through storms with serenity because you are anchored beyond the temporal. Even when your voice is silent, your spirit speaks. Even when your body rests, your essence still ministers. The eternal anointing outlives your name, continuing its work through the lives you touched, the prayers you spoke, and the faith you carried. In this realm, divine intimacy becomes unbroken. You no longer seek to encounter God. You live as His expression. The eternal anointing is the completion of all levels: the surface, healing, mantle, overflow, covenant, generational, and glory, all merging into endless communion. It is the oil that connects beginnings and endings, life and afterlife, heaven and earth. Here, the believer finally understands that the anointing was never about power, position, or performance. It was about union. The eternal anointing is the moment when the vessel and the oil become indistinguishable, when all that remains is light, pure, unending, and forever one with God. And now, child of faith, after walking through these 8 sacred levels, pause and listen. Can you feel the stillness rising inside you? That is the echo of the oil calling you deeper. From the first touch upon the skin to the eternal flow within the soul, every level has been an invitation, not a destination. The oil has been more than liquid, it has been language. It spoke when words failed. It healed what medicine could not. It lifted you from weakness into purpose, from purpose into overflow, from overflow into glory, and finally into oneness with the eternal. Every drop was a step, every level a revelation of who you were always meant to become. You see now that anointing is not an event, but a journey, a divine unfolding that begins in the natural and ends in the timeless. It starts with the hand holding a bottle and ends with the heart becoming a vessel. Those who stop at the first level will know comfort, but not transformation. Those who keep walking will find themselves remade in the image of divine strength, bearing light where darkness once ruled. The olive oil that began as a symbol becomes the very breath of heaven moving through your veins, carrying restoration for all who cross your path. This is the mystery and the promise that the same Spirit that hovered over creation hovers still, waiting for vessels who will not settle for shallow water. You were not created to touch the surface. You were made to dwell in the depths. Let the oil remind you that you are chosen, that your lineage is blessed, that your existence carries the fragrance of divine purpose. Rise now, with oil on your hands and eternity in your spirit. Walk as one, anointed beyond measure, overflowing, unafraid, unshakable. Let your life become the sermon, your breath become the prayer, and your journey become the testimony that the oil of God never runs dry.